Yes. Okay. So let's dive into this because I think, yeah, Josh and I were talking. I feel like we used Lit 2 or 3 years ago for something that we were building,
Yep.
We couldn't
and
even remember what it was for.
Yeah.
So
yeah, like what is? Yeah, dude, I've been checking back on some of those things that we did. Like, if you find these random docs, you're like, oh fuck, I remember that thing. that we
I
did.
remember that too.
oh, nice. Oh, yeah.
Dope. Maybe we'll talk afterwards. You can remind me about what exactly we were trying to go do at that time. But I do want to make sure that we get into understand the network and the business here, because I think, we're talking about capital markets, we're talking about bringing tokens to market, and expanding the understanding of what it is that you guys are actually doing and why this token matters. So maybe take that from wherever you want to take it, and then Josh and I can pull at some threads to see if we can get some more clarity.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I think Lit protocol is particularly unique, and one of the things that was most exciting to us about the community launch process is that there is a network that we've been running for a year, basically subsidized on a testnet token that's got nearly $500 million in assets under management and manages millions of key pairs. As Jesse mentioned, something about like 45% of those assets are on the base chain. And what's unique about Lit is that it is a fundamental network. It's not a new blockchain, and it's also not a dApp. It is explicitly built as this distributed network for programming, signing, and encryption. So at a very, very fundamental level, like digital ownership and digital assets are made up of state, which is blockchains, and signing, which is the key material. And so the insight that we've been working on for the past 4.5 years is, can we let developers write programs the same way that they write smart contracts, but instead of the output being a state change with a smart contract, it's a signature or the ability to decrypt something from the underlying distributed key. So we kind of see it's like very much a Gen 2 network. It doesn't make sense really to have something like this unless there's already a world proliferated with blockchains. But then in a world proliferated with blockchains, it becomes a very piece of vital infrastructure. And so just a couple more seconds on the time frame. We got the V0 network up. The next step to launch the V1 network, which is a commercialized network that has like some pretty sophisticated tokenomics associated with it that we're really excited about and happy to get into, is doing this token launch, spinning up the V1 network. But really the future that we see is one where like every digital society, whether it's a blockchain, a network state, or a nation state, is managing its key material for itself through a distributed key management network. Then there's plenty to get into around like how those can mesh together to even provide more resilience, and what that means for users and users of both crypto and then the web at large as things become more embedded, is basically like automation and agents everywhere that work across all systems, but that are safe such that they are scoped within guardrails.
Can you just maybe, for our non-technical brains, put a finer point on like maybe an example of how a developer would use Lit protocol and where the kind of key signing comes in?
Yeah, absolutely. So because it is a fundamental primitive, there are like a pretty wide diversity of the ways that people have implemented this. Like the example that we worked on from 2 years ago was believe something around like token gatings and data marketplaces. So that's one that's a little bit less asset focused. On the asset side, the main driver of usage today is around interoperability. So teams like Osmosis, Genius, Tria, Emblem Vault, they're all using Lit, sometimes in different ways, but mainly to control assets on some arbitrary chain side, whether it's doing vaults. And so that's really the main driver. And then there's about $1 million of deposits inside of this newer open source automation system that we've built around managing delegation.
Interesting. Yeah, I think. Well, I'm familiar. Yeah, because I think maybe people aren't fully familiar with just the friction and challenge of being able to do all those things that you were saying before, and especially doing it in a cross-chain way or in a world where there's lots of assets on lots of different chains. But I think that the big question to my mind is why token? Like, what is a token ultimately doing here for you, and why do I want to hold this for a long time to come?
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I guess just to put one fine point on the product itself, probably the easiest way to think about this is like if you could imagine your password manager being a place that could actually run apps and execute things for you rather than you just like fetching it out of a vault. and like Lit is a version of that that's functionally in the cloud because it's run by a distributed network. And so that's the new primitive in short. In terms of why a token, like I don't want to be on the top of the North Koreans list in terms of who is holding the keys, right? Like it's just table stakes obvious to make a system such as this, which is a fundamental privacy and trust network and primitive, as decentralized and distributed and control as possible. So the fundamental reason for doing it is for this basically creating as secure of a network as possible. And then the token also introduces some other dynamics. So basically the launch sequence is launch the token, use the token to essentially elect the Genesis node operator set for V1. They perform something called a distributed key generation together. And then thereafter, a pretty novel token model flips on. Like, and I'll compare. It's essentially a merger, and we're pretty excited about it, of VE dynamics that you find on Aerodrome with retroactive ecosystem funding that you see on a lot of L2s. So the current model is L2s. They take the revenue from the sequencer, and then there's some committee that goes, these are the 5 important teams. Let's pay them out. There's many cases where it's a lot more sophisticated. That's a little bit reductive. But instead of anybody from our team deciding like, where should the reward emissions go? That is also the token holders who are receiving those fees from the ecosystem team. So rather than 1 week epochs, it's 1 month epochs, but almost creates this little like fantasy sports venture style game in 1 month tranches as teams start generating revenue that's collected by the VE lit key holders, who in turn direct rewards towards those teams. So yes, the hybrid of VE. Another way to think about this token model is like if you take the Aerodrome model and you substitute out LP pools and instead you put in like ecosystem teams.
Can you? I'm curious how.
Yeah.
So the sense here is that there's this fundamental infrastructure. It is going to get more valuable as more people build more valuable things on top of it, and this model is sort of turning over the direction of incentives to building those out to token holders, which I think makes a ton of sense. I think in the Aerodrome model, if I think about LPs, there's meaningful fee generation that's happening at that level. Is there fee generation happening from sort of the incentives, or where the incentives are directed in Lit protocol?
Yeah, 100%. So these teams that are these ecosystem teams, these are venture-backed teams that have raised in the order of, $2 to $20 million. They have their own commercial model. And then Lit for them is part of their costs of goods sold, right?
Okay.
So that revenue that they're paying for this fundamental service then flows into this model. But like they need to stand on their own in terms of being able to generate value in the same way that any given LP pool generates value with fees.
Interesting. And so the fee model for Lit protocol is sort of on a transaction basis, or how is that economics working there?
Yeah, there's three streams of revenue. For people that build on the base level protocol, like the underlying Lit protocol, which is a generalized computing network for signing and encryption, they pay on a per request basis and on a per compute second unit used. Then we've got this automation platform that we call Vincent that wallets are installing, and there's about 50 teams building automation apps with right now, which is like our contribution to the ecosystem that sits alongside the other 150 plus ecosystem teams. And that system specifically generates revenue on performance, generally on yield optimization, and also charging a nominal basis point fee on swaps. And that revenue also flows back to the same tokenized model. And then finally, the third thing, and we're still a little bit earlier here because we're just starting to set up the V1 network, is third parties setting up their own Lit protocol network. So there's some pretty interesting discussions right now with blockchains that want to add their own threshold signing. So we already see examples of this out in the industry. Near has something called Near Intents with chain signatures. ICP, aka Definity, has chain keys. And all that those products have really done is bolted on threshold signing to their blockchain nodes and nominated a different type of node that is a signing node. Lit is a signing network. So any chain, any network state, nation state, consortium can basically use this software to run their own distributed key underneath their own umbrella. And there is an economic model that connects that back to the underlying token.
Nice. I like that my brain gets broken a little bit on this, but I'm following the breadcrumbs here. I mean, clearly you're talking about nation states. So you have a pretty big vision for where obviously all this technology goes. And my guess is you see it as this market being very small, talking about crypto today, and very, very, very big at some point in the future. Can you maybe lay out that big vision for us? Like, give me the
Yeah.
10-year picture here. Where are we going?
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, like where we're at is there is like this problem of secret management. The timing was really great for us in terms of we were like, let's build this. Some of the components just unfolded in like the 12 months prior to us starting the development on this. But it is, in our view, like quite a foundational undertaking where like secret management is a problem as old as computer science itself. It's decades old. Where do you put the keys? It's a fundamental question every time you're building an application. And so we're just starting to see what that looks like in terms of like the use of crypto, but I think it also implies a different use of software just in general in the fullness of time. And I'll give you an example. Like today with AI agents, if you log into Google Docs, Gemini pops up, and it's kind of like, you know, Clippy 2.0. The assistant lives within the application. And in general, that's like how intelligence is being served to people today in our still kind of app-centric model. As things move into a more agent-centric model, you could have intelligence behind the authority, behind the account, and then when the account is logged into, the system isn't aware of, is this an agent or is this a person, which is like precisely how dApps work. dApps have like already got the design paradigm right in terms of if somebody has the key, that represents this user. And so that's like a paradigmatic shift that there's a potential of happening in terms of this very familiar experience we have of I log into this thing and all of my stuff is there versus all of my stuff in automation exists outside of the application. You know, you could start to like even have conversations around what does a collective intelligence look like that runs on public rails that isn't necessarily owned by like a corporate entity or a company, but corporate entities can plug into it. But it's hard to see that vision today because like the water we're all swimming in is we're all renters pretty much everywhere except in crypto of our own data and our own authority inside of walled gardens.
Well, I mean, yeah, I've been seeing the sort of the shift in AI and the incredible competitive dynamics that are really data driven there, and having gone through it in sort of the Web 2 space and sort of, I mean, seeing just the growth of OpenAI and the powerful position they've put themselves in. It either goes in a way that is less ideal for individual human flourishing, but we get to, you know, talk to sex bots all the time, or there's an alternative path here. And very appreciative of people who are obviously very smart pushing in the alternate direction. We shall see where it goes. All right. I mean, you guys are counting down. I think TGE is technically next week on the 30th. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, it's the 30th at midnight UTC time. So that would be 8 p.m. Eastern on the 29th.
And I think pre-deposit vaults are open right now. Is that the right language to use?
Yes, I am on my other screen here tracking the airdrome voters. Looks like somebody in the wee morning hours for me did a large vote, and that's really cool to see. So it's all happening on chain and in real time.
Amazing, man. Well, all right. So that's at Lit Protocol on X. We've got a couple days if you are a VE voter to jump in and cast your votes. I did just want to put a fine point on sort of the secondary liquidity pool you're bringing out, because I think that is a shift for folks that maybe had been following Syndicate before and sort of participated in the early days there. There was a ton of volatility around that token price. Sounds like this is a strategy specifically trying to limit that. Can you just reiterate what that is and maybe if that's like the right place for more of a general retail user to really tune into?
I mean, it's hard for me to say like what somebody's an individual's risk appetite is and what they feel about the thing. I think we're working with a very limited set of information with like just the syndicate project going before this. So there's like educated guesses here, but gaming it out, it makes sense that there's a very, very unique dynamic that's set up with the VE token launch. Certainly, and we could reveal all of this with some more data analysis and tracking every individual token from like the syndicate launch. Did it come in through, in terms of when the token arrived on the market, did it come in through the sexes selling to the market? Did it come in through the aerodrome reward voters who got the token, like not LPing it and selling it, did it arrive in the market that way? So there's definitely like really good analysis to do, and us and the aerodrome team have done some of that. But at some point, we basically just have to like take a step back, figure out what were the general insights from the way that that process happened, and what can we do to have a flow that basically, to like the point that Jesse was setting up, that like is transparent in the price setting, but then hopefully not too radical and crazy as people start to say, oh, a price is established, a market is emerging here, and then, you know, as we've mentioned, like, and then moving into a global launch. We absolutely exist in a world where most people interact with crypto assets across a wide variety of centralized exchanges.
All right, man. We'll have to leave it there. You have a fun few days ahead of you, I'm sure. But yeah, congrats on 3-4 years of hard work and really just getting to a whole other starting line here. I think is you get to go and be out there with a public asset in the market, and a lot yet to still be built. Yeah. Appreciate you jumping on, and would love to. I mean, the debriefing on this, I think, is going to be interesting. So I don't know if your team decides to go and sort of unpack some of that data, or if you want to come on afterwards and maybe reflect, because I think to us, this is probably the most important question for any builder out there today. It's how do we go create efficient markets for these assets,
Right.
and do it in a way that really benefits both asset holders, the protocol or product that is being launched, and ultimately the users of those things. So hopefully we can check back in with you, but wish you the best of luck in the next coming days.
Yeah, I would be happy to. And it's just really excellent because like the timing works out that it's the exact moment that anybody can get involved, like right at the start of likely the biggest and most exciting chapter to date.
Amazing. David
Love it.
Sneider
Thank you guys.
at Lit
Peace, man.
Protocol. Thanks, sir.